Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 60th episode of the Online Tennis Podcast. Today it's me, Jack, and I am joined by Mr. David Gertler. David, how are you doing?
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm ready. Let's talk some tennis, right?
Great. Yeah, as always, David's super keen. Thanks, David, for joining me. Please go check out his blog, all about tennis blog, etc., etc. I'll give you more details at the end of the show. David, today we are going to be talking about everything Cincinnati Masters on the WTA side, of course. We had I can literally every single episode I do this, I forget who it was immediately. And I always want to say Swiatek, that's the thing, David. But no, it was Caroline Garcia that won Cincinnati out of nowhere qualifier, and Borna Coric also out of nowhere on the ATP side. It was very exciting, very interesting. I've got plenty to talk about, early exits, finalists, etc. David, are you ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
The first place I wanted to start, however, is on the WTA side. So I'm looking at early exits. This may not count as an early exit, really. It doesn't really, but you can't not talk about Serena's second last match before talking about anything else. I would imagine losing to Emma
Second. Oh,
Raducanu.
you're saying that she's losing first round if it's second to
No, of
last.
course. Sorry. Second
I
last
mean, you're
loss.
not wrong.
Second last loss, I should say. There's no way she's winning the US Open. I didn't mean to
No
say second
way.
last loss. But yeah, sorry. I don't think she'll lose in the first round. I think she'll have maybe third, fourth round. But did you get to see the match, David?
I saw some of it. Yeah, it was I try to be honest. I'm a huge Serena fan, long time. Like she was my first favorite player. I don't like watching her at this stage in her career because it's almost like when you see a player, and even though she's not like that old, but like she's holding on. It's like it's not the same player that I grew to love, and it's almost sad watching her at this point. Um, Raducanu was good. I mean, she didn't have to be great. People were talking about, oh, Raducanu beat and excuse me if I'm mispronouncing her name, but she beat, Serena and Vika back to back. And I'm thinking to myself, come on, like Serena was at what, a D compared to what she used to be, DF, and then Vika wasn't close. Vika against Kanepi in the round before really shouldn't have won that. She was down a break in the third, and she was erratic and untimely double faults, and it really was not a great performance. So when I heard that, people were like, heaping praise on Raducanu for beating, Serena and Vika back to back, I was just kind of like, oh, whatever. But yeah, so back to your question. In terms of this match, it was a little bit of a letdown. I think that any Serena match at this point is going to be a little bit of a letdown because Serena's not the player that maybe more casual fans think that she is still. And so, yeah, seeing the 6-0 set though, that was rough. And because in Serena's glory days, she wasn't going to the bakery with anyone really for the most part.
Yeah.
What did you think of the match?
Brilliant stuff there, David, because I've got a few, a little bit of elaboration on that, certainly. Ninth bagel of Serena's career, so she really hasn't been taken to the bakery much at all in her career. To her 151 bagels delivered, by the way, so that's 151 to 9,
Jeez.
which is just, I know, yeah, it's absolutely mental stat. But yeah, you don't beat players like Serena making one unforced error. That was Raducanu's unforced error tally. She really didn't have to do much, didn't have to force errors that with much off her strings at all, to be honest. Serena just looked a lot looser than I expected her to be. I don't even think the movement was as awful as some people say it is. The ball sometimes is in her strike zone and she still makes the error. So she really does look out of sorts, and it really is a very, very unlikely. I don't want to say impossible because, of course, who knows? But it's so unlikely she's going to be doing much at the US Open. So it wasn't. It was a bit of a letdown. And yeah, Raducanu, I agree with you, David. I don't think there's much to be said about her form beating those two players, to be honest. And going into the US Open for her as well, I wouldn't really fancy her chances if I was being honest.
Yeah, and I mean a lot of it depends on the draw, but I mean you're right. She in Serena, it's just like when I look at the stats, it's like, okay, Raducanu won 76% of her first serves, 75% of her second serves, and Serena won 13% of her 2 of 16 second serves. Like those just are numbers that say right off the bat, I just throw the match out. It doesn't reflect
Yeah.
Serena's, what we know of Serena, but also it doesn't tell us anything about Raducanu. I mean, when I look at Raducanu's chances at the U.S. Open, I look much more at, okay, how'd she do in Toronto? Lost first round to Camila Giorgi. How'd she do in Washington? She beat Chirico, tells us nothing. She grinded out a ridiculously long straight set win over Camila Osorio, and then she lost to Samsonova, overpowered in that match in straight sets. So
Yeah.
that tells me kind of more about how she's going to
Yeah.
do in the U.S. Open rather than, oh, she beat Serena and Vika and then lost to Pegula in straight sets.
Yeah, undoubtedly, David. Yeah, I'll leave it at that for now. But I totally agree with you. I think the Washington Open was much more reflective of our form, I think, at the moment. A few injuries just to update people on. So Halep did opt to rest after a thigh injury, probably sustained from a grueling battle with Anastasia Potapova. Probably just the wise thing to do in the run-up to the US Open. Of course, probably the tournament she is most keen to do well at, having never made a final there, the only slam she's not made a final of. And Coco Gauff as well rolled her ankle against Buskova. I don't believe it was terrible, but I think she retired from their match to avoid a proper injury. I'm pretty sure that's the case, David, right?
Yeah, so she was, honestly, it's 2 weeks before the slam, I guess, with Cincinnati. It's the players are going to be extra cautious. Even last week, this week now in Winston Salem and Cleveland and Granby, they're going to be a little more cautious. I didn't think that Gauff. I was watching that Gauff Buskova match. I didn't think that Gauff looked like super injured, but she looked like she was in her own head about it, and she just I think she didn't want to make it worse, and she didn't know how bad it was, until you get evaluation after the match. So she just pulled the plug.
Yeah, exactly, David. Yeah, that was my sort of take on it as well. The last early exit I want to talk about just before we move on to the finalists was, of course, Iga Swiatek's loss to Madison Keys. Keys' first career win over a world number one. Keys had plenty to say about it. In fact, talked about the US Open regular duty ball in particular that they used. She said, "It's like my favourite ball. Starts pretty fast and I think it stays pretty consistent throughout until ball change. They never really slow down, which is great for me. And in my opinion, I mean, I can see why she doesn't like these, talking about Swiatek, of course. This is definitely the first time we've played on a faster court, so I definitely felt more comfortable with the conditions just from the start. Now, more comfortable, she's probably talking about Indian Wells, when Swiatek beat her 6-1, 6-love even, at night. She only got one game last time. She said, after I got 2 games in this match, I was like, okay, I'm fine. She totally relaxed, apparently. Yeah, really interesting stuff because the conditions make such a big difference in this game.
Yeah.
Obviously, Madison Keys, I was going to say, David, Madison Keys in these conditions could beat anybody, right? I don't think that's that crazy a loss for me. Would you agree?
I guess I have a lot of thoughts, and I'll try to keep it brief. So first off, we're talking night and Indian Wells. So our Indian Wells is already a slow hard court, and we're playing in night conditions, which makes it even slower. Versus Cincinnati, your daytime on a quick hard court. Cincinnati this year was playing super fast. So obviously, Swiatek, we saw her at the French Open. We saw her at Indian Wells. She likes slower conditions, more clay-like conditions, which is what Indian Wells kind of brought to the table versus Cincinnati. Keys was able to rush her a lot more. We saw that on Swiatek's second serve. She only won 34% of her second serves, and she was broken 5 times. So that's a big thing. In terms, you mentioned the balls. Here's what I'll say, because this has been a very active discussion on social media. We'll put it that way. I think that Swiatek has a point that it does, and Badosa I saw today also talked about it, about how it's ridiculous to be playing different balls as the men and also different balls for these different stops on tour. And where's the consistency here? It feels very disjointed. At the same time, everyone plays with the same balls. And yes, I think one of Swiatek's points was that the ball flies on her, but the ball should be flying on a power player like Madison Keys too. But Keys was able to adapt to the conditions better. So I don't necessarily, I agree with her, but I don't necessarily buy that that's all of a sudden why she's spraying so many, of her grand strokes. Because ever since Wimbledon, she's been pretty erratic. It seems like she's trying to overhit and end points a little too quickly. How do you grade Swiatek since the Cornet match at Wimbledon?
I honestly, I honestly think she's come against opponents that deserve to beat her. Had Maya seriously hit a spike of form, like she
Mm-hmm.
was playing fantastic tennis and really deserved to win that match. And it was a close match. I mean, Swiatek could have maybe grafted that out
Yeah,
2 months ago when she was at the peak of her form, right? And we wouldn't have said any more about it. But it was just one of those ones that could have went either way. Fine, had Maya wins that. The Garcia win, Garcia played it out of our skin, and all of a sudden now we're like, oh well, that was a justifiable win because Garcia has just become like the Cincinnati Masters champion. I don't read much into that either. This one's probably the least likely of the three, and even then, Keys on a fast hard court, fine.
yeah,
Like it's not a bad loss, and it's not a good matchup. It's not a good matchup for
yeah.
Swiatek at all.
In these
So
conditions,
I don't. Yeah, I'm not that worried, David. Although the US Open probably isn't going to suit her that much either, to be honest. So I wouldn't chalk it down to a lack of confidence so much. Maybe it's the sort of matches. These are the sort of matches she could have won, amidst her crazy streak. But at the same time, I don't think she's lost that much,
yeah.
to be honest.
That's fair. And I think that we shouldn't, and you brought this up, the streak. I don't think we should. She was never going to win
Yeah,
out for the season. So for everyone, yeah. So I think that unfortunately that did create some, for me too. And for my, I'm not out of blame too, some unrealistic expectations because she had, it was just going to be impossible, especially because she was never like as good as like peak Serena. Like,
mm,
she was never like, her level was much higher than everyone else, but it wasn't like, all time great high. And so just give her some time. She's still young. I'm sure she'll win the French Open next year. But I don't
yeah.
necessarily think that on faster court she's going to be able to do what she showed during that win streak.
Keys, on the other hand, yeah, having beat Ostapenko and Rybakina in this tournament, she's going to look dangerous at the US Open for sure. I mean, last couple of years, she's kind of been unlucky not to make a decent-ish run. Tough unseeded players in the early rounds. Remember Cornet in the third round in 2020. She can beat anybody on her day, really. She's shown that in slams. Repeat of the 2017 final, of course, with
Yeah.
Stevens last year in the first round. That was so unlucky. And again, obviously, she could have won that in a third set tiebreak. So, yeah, I think repeats of 2017 and 2018 form when she made the final and semis. Who knows? Definitely quarters, at least for me, if she's got a good draw.
Yeah, Keys has had a really weird year, right? Because she started out so strong in Australia, then she just like went away,
Yeah,
and now it's a resurgence again. So, well,
yeah.
I think the conditions. What do you? I don't know if you've seen qualifying at all today, but the courts look like they're playing pretty fast, which I would say
Right.
is good for a player like Keys, and basically all of the Cincinnati semifinalists. I,
Yeah.
I mean, that was quite the power tennis lineup, huh?
Yeah, but Petra, Keys, and what was it, Garcia, and who did
Sabalenka.
she beat again? Sabalenka, yeah, so it was. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, any of those players, I wouldn't be surprised to see any of those players in the semis.
Well, the
Definitely.
thing about
Who knows?
Kvitova is she never has done particularly well in New York just because of the humidity, not necessarily in the heat. And that's why I thought, I thought, when Jil Teichmann in the first round dragged her out to that, I don't know how much of that match you saw, but Jil Teichmann dragged her out.
Oh, all of it.
Okay, yeah, so Jil Teichmann
Yeah.
dragged her to she served for the second set, and even when Kvitova won the second set, I thought, oh, there's no way she's going to hold up in the heat, and against a grinder like Teichmann, and she held up pretty damn well, though. I was impressed.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a perfect segue, actually, David, because that's
Well, good.
exactly where I was going to move on to. Yeah, I was just going to talk about the finalists, and yeah, Kvitova having survived in the first round. She also saved a match point, of course, in the second set tiebreak. Just a really decent serve and forehand combo, sort of textbook stuff from her for sure. She was brilliant in that match, and yeah, you're quite right, for her to hold up. Maybe signs of things to come at the US Open, because if she can keep playing like that, then she's got a really good chance. She was great in that match. It was so good. I thought just even that win alone was big for her, and then all of a sudden she makes the run to the final. It was a huge week for her, seriously, because I think she kind of needed that. She's had a kind of rough couple of years. It was actually the longest stretch of events in her career without making a WTA 1000 final
Wow.
since winning her first.
That's
Yeah,
interesting. I
so
didn't even.
yeah.
It's a good. I mean, that's a good stat. I didn't even, that's something I didn't even think of. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now let me ask you this. Remember before Wimbledon, she won, I think it was Eastbourne. It was one of those. No, it was maybe Birmingham.
One or the other. I can't remember now.
Yeah, and then she didn't play that great at Wimbledon. So it'll be interesting to see if she can sustain this next week at the U.S. Open.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd love to have all the stats on Kvitova as a form player. I don't know if necessarily winning breeds winning for her, but it certainly feels that way. Definitely, you kind of she seems to go on tears, right? I might be wrong. That's a total gut feeling, but I'm not 100% sure about that. But that's kind of what I feel, David.
Yeah, it's so weird that like all of a sudden that Kirstea match after that, it was just like a different like it was like she lift off, like just a totally different level than we even saw
Yeah,
against Teichmann.
yeah. I mean, she's got that scary sort of red line to her game that just nobody could beat if she's playing well enough, of
Yeah.
course. And yeah, the little other stat, of course. Yeah, she made I'm sure you might have heard Garcia in her speech, the 40th final of her career. Like she's turning into. I mean, she was already a legend, to be fair, but she's really, really cementing it. It's just crazy, crazy career. She's been immensely good, so good.
Probably deserved more than two slams.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I would say so. She's got the game for it, for sure. I suppose it's just putting it together every match, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about Carol Garcia
Mm-hmm.
winning the title. Third WTA 1000 of her career, 11th title overall, first qualifier to win a WTA 1000, of course, we've seen at the start of the pods. In fact, she had to beat Parry and Petkovic even qualify, which, I mean, they're two decent scalps, although I suppose Parry may be on a hard court, but still, yeah, it's very, very impressive. Most wins now since the start of June on the tour, 4 Love versus top 10, 250s, 1 in Baden-Berg and Warsaw, titles spanning all 3 surfaces. I'll ask you how she ranks in your power rankings for the US Open actually after this. Just quick analysis of the match, David, if you'll indulge me. I felt like Caro Garcia all tournament, sublime serving. Of course, I think everybody considers her one of the best servers on tour, I would have said. But now leads the tour in number of aces struck this year, even beating Rybakina, of course. More so than that, though, Garcia, I feel this stat is probably the most telling one, is incredible at saving breakpoints. She leads the tour this year at 67% breakpoints saved, better than anybody else. Also led this tournament at 83%, so better than anybody else in the tournament. But she's delivering amazing serves under pressure. I feel like that's her USP for me. Like she does that better than pretty much any other player. There was aces against Kvitova in this match, for example. Love 40, 15-40 to save breakpoints, under turn serves as well. Did that come across to you, David, at all? Or, I mean, I don't even know if I'm underselling her. Maybe she should be considered like right up there with the top 3 best servers, but I don't know if that's maybe
I
too
want to
much.
see it more like longer term than we've seen it so far. What stands out to me
Mm-hmm.
about Garcia is how aggressive she is. Her return positioning, how she just
Yeah.
absolutely tries to any short ball she just wallops. Whether it may, and sometimes it doesn't work out. It's in the back fence, but that puts a lot of pressure, especially like when she's in that second serve, when she's almost standing in the service box and she is putting so much pressure on her opponent to hit
Mm.
well placed first serve or second serves. It's really impressive stuff. And
Mm.
do I particularly like watching any of the WTA Cincinnati semifinalists? Not. I would prefer, the Cerebus Tormos of the world, but I can't deny that her serving has been really nice. I mean, you talked about her surface versatility and her aggression on court. It's not always controlled, but it makes a statement and a good point, and she's a really strong contender for the U.S. Open. I don't have her like the number one, but looking at the field, she's got to be in the top 5 at this point, at least.
Yeah. I just said so for sure. Here's an interesting just addition to the return. Of course, like you know how amazing her return can be, how effective it can be against certain players. Players maybe don't place their serve as well and still keep it within the reach of Garcia. She's actually the lowest this year in the top 50 for return points won.
Huh.
of all 50 players, which I
Wow.
know, yeah,
Yeah.
it knocked me back. But my takeaway from that is the last three tournaments, her return percentages sort of align within the top 25. You're talking about a really, really crazy spike in that particular asset, I think, of hers. I think at the start of the year, she was really struggling to deliver the return of serve as she would have liked. Maybe that's a confidence thing, maybe it's a feel thing, I don't know. But certainly when she was climbing her ranking from number 70 odd at the start of the year to now number 17, I believe, in the world, I think that's been the biggest factor for her in getting herself back to her
Yeah,
best.
and I think that when you don't have that feel, having that type of return positioning where you're giving yourself no time and you're just trying to smash these lower margin shots, maybe isn't the best strategy. That's what I'm kind of talking about in terms of sustaining it, because she really does not play with a lot of margin. Kvitova doesn't either, and
Yeah,
so all it takes. We saw in Palermo when she just hit herself out of that match against Bronzetti, and it could happen in New York. It really could. Like,
yeah,
I don't trust any of the Cincinnati women semifinalists just because of the low margin tennis that they all play. But at the end of the day,
yeah,
that's what's going
yeah.
to make New York so exciting, is because we just really, in the WTA side, we really just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, my quick analysis just to wrap up on how Garcia could fare against certain players. So she's kind of got that feel back for sure on return, but it's about taking the ball early, basically, and reading the bounce and the serve for sure. What she can also do is stand at the baseline and absorb, linear, heavy ground strokes or flat ground strokes, I guess, from her toes. You see how well she half volleys and stuff like that. You understand maybe why she's been like number 2 in the world in doubles. It all kind of makes sense sort of watching her play. But she matches up so well against players like Kvitova that like to sort of smack it down the middle first and then go for a sort of a more angled shot or just hit into the open space, basically. I feel like she'll do really well against any of the semi-finalists. Sakkari, Sabalenka. Sakkari, though, is another one, of course, because she beat Sakkari earlier in the week. Keys, Rybakina would be another one. Kvitova. All of these players probably are going to be quite. It's not a guarantee, of course. Any of these players could beat anybody on their day, but Garcia would probably fare better against them than, say, the Cornies of the world. Somebody with a little bit of power, but also still a counter puncher in essence of game style. Somebody who can kind of move her around a bit with angles and stuff. I feel like somebody like that would be more dangerous for
Yeah,
Garcia.
I totally agree. The problem with you never know when a player like Kvitova or Rybakina is going to hit start serving aces out and winners out of out of their ass, and take the racket out of
Yeah,
even
exactly.
Kara's hands. It'll be interesting. But I do agree that the players that can kind of like Bronzetti in Palermo, who kind of just work the point, work the ball around, use some good variety. That type of style maybe is a little harder for Caroline to combat. I agree.
Yeah, 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 exactly, David. Yeah, yeah. So it's quite interesting. It's really interesting going into how the draw pan out, because really it could be a nightmare for some players. It could be brilliant for other players. So it'll be interesting. With that said, I think we'll wrap up in the WTA there and move on to the ATP if you're ready.
Let's do it.
Yeah, brilliant. First place to start would be early exits again. First one I wanted to talk about was PCB winning or losing, sorry, in the first round. That's Pablo Carreno Busta, of course. Huge dip for last week's Montreal champion. Normally, I'd sort of leave this alone. This can happen quite easily, but the dip. There's one stat that really just totally threw me. He hit 13 double faults in his loss to Mir Manojevich. And I mean, the previous highest amount of double faults he'd hit in any 3-set match was
Gee,
6. Totally bizarre. I know, yeah, yeah. So 20 double faults throughout all of his losses combined this year, and in this loss he's hit 13. It just a crazy, crazy dip. Obviously, the high of Montreal must have been so big. The crash must have just been.
maybe just a
I don't
little
know.
fatigue in the
I don't.
legs or something.
Yeah.
It's that's when that's more than even I thought. When you said 13, I'm like,
Yeah.
now I'm looking at it says 13. It's like, wow. in the fact that he
Yeah.
was, he didn't play that well, and he's still, it was still a pretty damn close match, third set tiebreak. Kecmanovic,
Yeah.
a guy that we maybe expected. I don't know about you, but maybe I expected, I don't want to speak for you, maybe to rise a little more quickly after what we saw in Miami. And then he maybe
Oh,
plateaued a
yeah.
little bit.
No, he definitely did. He's not really taken any crazy scalps from what I can remember since Miami at all, actually. Pretty
Yeah,
sure.
he got a set off Djokovic in Belgrade, but then he didn't end up winning. I think he got it.
It was a really
Yeah,
high level, but he did. It was a really high level. I remember that match being
yeah.
brilliant, but he didn't win it, I suppose.
Do you consider PCB a
Yeah,
big scalp for him, or given the fatigue, not really?
not really given the 13 double
Yeah,
faults, I'd have said.
yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah, I've not been totally impressed with him, I gotta say, David. But yeah, just really weird from PCB. I know obviously we can give him the benefit of the doubt with the title run, but it's totally out of character. So just exceptional, and I wanted to talk about it a little bit. It was a bit crazy. Another one I want to talk about, David. It's not an early exit necessarily. I think nobody's expecting Berrettini to fly through the draws at the moment, but just wanted to talk about Tiafoe a little bit because of the drama that happened during the match. There was this crazy backhand pass that Tiafoe missed by like 2 millimeters on the first match point he had. Got to watch it back if you've not seen it at home. It was like right at the end of the third set, just before the tiebreak. I also wanted to mention the match just because it's been a pretty tough year for Tiafoe. I think round of 16 at Wimbledon, but obviously no ranking points for that. So sitting at number 25 in the world, but round of 16 points to defend at the US Open, and the final of Vienna as well. So I mean, he's going to lose a
Yeah,
lot of points soon. And really, he said it himself. This is his quote. People don't understand. Obviously, results haven't really shown how well I've been playing. I've been playing some great tennis, honestly. I really just needed this, talking about the win. I know it's a first round match, but everyone knew why I needed this against a quality player. He's right. He is playing good tennis. I feel like he's been a bit hard done by in some of his matches. Certainly, 5 match points comes to mind against Kyrgios at the City Open, for example, and then Kyrgios goes on to win the tournament, of course. Yeah, he's won, and obviously Wimbledon as well. Makes a really deep run at Wimbledon, but doesn't get any ranking points for it. I just feel like he's been hard done by a little
yeah.
bit,
With the
David.
exception of his quarterfinal or semifinal loss to Jensen Brooksby in Atlanta, he's lost in a deciding set in every match since after the French Open. So in London, he lost in 3 sets
Wow.
to Wawrinka. In Eastbourne, he lost in 3 sets to Bublik. In
Well, that Wawrinka one was crazy as
Yeah,
well, wasn't
it's
it? It was
all
like,
these
yeah,
really close matches. But-
yeah.
and then at Wimbledon, 5 set loss to Goffin. Then the Brooksby loss. But then in Washington, he got a set off Kyrgios and ended up losing that one in the third. And then we have Montreal 3 set loss to Fritz, and then last week 3 set loss, and then in Cincinnati 3 set loss to Korda. So he's right there, but it's just he
Yeah,
can't get over the hump.
yeah. That's a perfect way to put it, David. Yeah, did not realize it was as bad as
Yeah.
that. Poor guy. Yeah, absolutely deserves it. He's going to have another deep run. Probably US Open definitely could happen. Of course, it could happen. Like he could beat a Rublev or somebody of that ilk again for sure. Who
Yeah,
knows?
we saw at the Australian Open that he can do it. I still remember. Didn't
Yeah.
he beat Kevin Anderson in maybe the round of 16 at that? Maybe it was 2019 Australian Open. He showed great. I think I really do, and I thought he was going to beat Goffin at Wimbledon. He's right there. A lot of these American men are just right there, and we're just waiting for them to bust the door open.
I know, yeah. Fritz obviously is, but I mean, he won Indian Wells. Obviously, that maybe counts as busting the door open. But I think everybody's waiting for a massive slam run, aren't they?
Yeah, they
So
want to see the
yeah,
slams are ultimately what players' careers are judged by.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, fingers crossed for any of them. We'll see. Right, next one I'd like to talk about is Andy. Unfortunately, actually, we have good news this week. I think the Stan Wawrinka one was really, really encouraging. Just very quickly talk about that because there was quite a lot to sort of unpack, a wee bit of analysis for you and stuff. Battle of the old men. Both guys had to get the physio out over and over, and in fact, at the end of the third or the start of the third set, 2-love down, and he was suffering from some cramping and honestly, it kind of stood him in great stead. I don't know if you got to see this, David. I'm not sure if you're Andy
I am
fan,
not.
but Yeah, I thought I wasn't sure, but maybe you're a Stan fan. I don't know.
I've,
Either way,
I've watched the
you
end of
probably
it,
did.
yeah.
You did,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. So actually, Andy was forced to go more aggressive, maybe than he normally would, because of his movement was kind of impaired. And he served really well. He hit some great winners at the tail end of the third set, serving and volleying to sort of stop the point from going on too long, just to get himself over the finish line and stuff. So obviously, as tactically astute as always, 400 return winners and stuff like that, 5-all to break. It's the kind of tennis we've been wanting from Andy for a long, long time. You know, really vintage stuff. If you want to see one of the points he was playing before he started cramping, yes, it's vintage Andy right at the start of the second set, the first point. But it's also the sort of point that us Andy fans are just like, you can't keep doing
Yeah.
this for the whole. You can't keep doing this for 6 matches. If you're planning on winning a tournament, Jesus, no, it's not happening. So it was really, really great to see, and actually really encouraging. I also just quite nice to see them fight it out for the 22nd time, I believe,
Yeah.
13-9 to Andy now. You must have felt that, I guess, David, even as an impartial
Well,
fan, I
I,
suppose.
I, I wouldn't say I don't like Murray, to be completely frank.
Okay,
I
all right,
mean,
no, that's fair.
I respect him. I don't like him. And I'm not gonna, and
That's fair.
I to be honest, at the same time, I respect him gutting that out, and he really should have beat Cam Norrie in the next round. He really hit it on
Yeah, we're
break
about to talk
point
about
in the
that.
third. I think it was in the third. It might have been the second set or the third set. He had a short forehand on break point, and he hit it right into the net. Do you
Oh,
remember that point?
I can tell you all the ones because I've got them all down here. There was that was the one in the third set that was just like, there's no way he should have lost that point, no way. But there was also 2 break points where he missed second serve returns, didn't even put the second serve
Yeah.
returns in the court, and unforgivable. There's no way Andy should be doing that in any shape or form. And there was one other one just at the start of the second set where he missed a volley by
Yes,
like
I remember.
a few
That was
millimeters.
another bad one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. So the point is though that as an Andy fan, obviously I know all of his losses over the last 2 years. Last year he had a lot of losses like this where he was just not converting opportunities. Fast forward about a year, maybe a few months ago, and we hadn't seen a loss really of that ilk for the entirety of the season, to be honest. Then all of a sudden, Michael Emer, he definitely should have won that match. There was 4 set points in the first set, and all of them were drop shots, just the sort of stuff he would have put away in his sleep back in his heyday. And then all of a sudden, we have another one that's just sort of reared its ugly head only a few weeks later. It's just starting to feel like Andy is kind of losing his edge a bit, kind of going back to the sort of level he was playing last year where he has chances but just doesn't do anything with them. And it's getting a little bit basically.
Well,
Yeah.
I,
So I don't know how to feel, David.
I noticed at the end of you talked about how he was physically at the end of the Wawrinka match. I also noticed at the end of the Nori match, maybe around 4-all in the third, I think it was 4-all. He started to look a little fatigued and like he was close to tapping out there too. And so he definitely does not have the physicality that I even think he had last year. I feel like that's starting to decline a little bit, which is a lot of the basis of his game nowadays. So that's not encouraging coming into the U.S. Open where it's going to be best of 5. He'll have to hope for a good draw.
Yeah. I mean, we were all saying that last year, and then of course, sits the pass in 5 sets. Who
Yeah,
knows? I really don't know. If I was being realistic, a third round's about as good as we can hope for. I think, David.
yeah, I agree.
That's pains me to say, but I genuinely think that's about the case. Moving swiftly on before I feel really upset.
Oh,
An introduction to an introduction. Well, we'll see. Who knows? Maybe I'm just jinxing it, or not jinxing it. I'm just saying that so that will happen, David. But yeah, we'll move on to an introduction to Ben Shelton, who I hadn't seen play before. To be honest, it was very, very encouraging stuff in his win over Casper Ruud. A little bit of backstory: he led the Florida Gators to victory in the singles of the NCAA Men's Tennis Championship. This year was one of the other, last year or this year. Son of Brian Shelton, who defeated, his sort of claim to fame was he defeated Michael Stitch at Wimbledon in 1994 with a career high ranking of number 55. Just coincidentally, obviously, like Casper, also coached by his dad, Christian, and I did look it up. They hadn't played before, but it was still kind of cool that they were both there. And anyway, yeah. Followed his win up at the NCAA Men's Tennis Championship with challenger final runs in Rome and Chicago to earn himself a wild card here in Cincinnati, and in his tour debut, win over Lorenzo Sonego in the first round was really encouraging. But then the win over Casper Ruud was fantastic, to be honest. It was really, really good. I mean, huge lefty server with quick flat strokes on a hard court, a really fast hard court, obviously, as well. Not the best matchup for Casper. It does make sense. Actually, his head-to-head v tall guys on hard, so 6-4 and over, is 10 out of 24, sort of 42%. So he does have a losing record against this sort of player on this sort of surface, which is quite interesting. However, I still thought it was very, very, very just solid stuff. He barely put a foot wrong. His serve was brilliant. He kept points as short as anybody could, really, against Casper Ruud. Favourite play, just before I ask you a little bit more about him, for me was we were talking about Hubert Hurkacz last week against Casper Ruud, coming in off the second serve, approaching the net, because Casper likes to stand really far back, obviously kind of like Medvedev, but on the second serve as opposed to the first. And Hurkacz took advantage of that. Shelton maybe watched the match, I don't know, and thought that's a really good tactic. I'm going to use it, and it worked every time. It's just really cool to see all-court play like that from somebody who's only 19 years old, obviously. Point of the match at 5-3 as well, if you've not seen it, the filthy tweener lob at, I think, the second point of that game. Had you seen Shelton play before, David? Were you encouraged by this week?
So I've seen... I don't watch a lot of college tennis, but I watch a lot of challengers, and so since he's been playing challengers, I've been watching him a lot, and I'm super encouraged, and I think he's the future of American men's tennis, more so than maybe a lot of the bigger names. Here's just a quick rundown. Yes, you mentioned the serve, huge serve. I especially like his lefty on the ad side, the lefty slider at wide. Which is a really nice serve and really great on break point too, and very hard to defend against. Forehand has great pop. He is very aggressive from that wing, and it has a bit of a longer windup, which opponents, for instance, Safiullin in the Chicago final, was able to rush him a little bit on that wing. We saw at the same time, his rally tolerance needs a little work, as we saw against Norrie. That was a rough one, but it's a good learning experience. His backhand's improving. It's solid, but it's not. It comes and it goes. He's becoming more and more comfortable coming to the net. I think that he sets himself up well to approach often, but maybe he's just a little hesitant. But he's getting there. But overall, I mean, I'm nitpicking a little bit. He's really an impressive player. Seems like he has a great team around him, great serve, great forehand, and a great attitude.
I mean, yeah, if you say future of men's tennis, then you must be pretty encouraged, David. I really like the sound of that. And I'm not surprised seeing him play.
American men, not overall. Not
American
Pete
men's
Alcaraz,
tennis.
But...
Yeah, he's not quite an Alcaraz, of course, but yeah, he kind of reminds me a bit of Jack Draper on our side of the pond, I gotta say.
That's a really good comparison. I like that. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, just big, tall, lefty guy, basically. But yeah, there's not many of them on tour, to be fair. So yeah,
I think he moves a little better than Draper does.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, just able to come forward a bit better than Draper and stuff. So yeah, definitely, I definitely agree with that. Moving on to the finalists, we had, of course, Tsitsipas. Oh no, yeah, sorry, a little segue on Medvedev first. Oh no, I can bung it into the same section. Moving on to the finalists, talking about Tsitsipas first, we will talk about Tsitsipas and Medvedev's match. One of the quotes of the week from Van de Zandschulp, who played Medvedev in the first round, double vaulted his way to a loss in some ways. I think 11 double faults in a 2-set match. Anyway, the quote though was brilliant. He's returning from so far. Other guys aren't returning that far, etc. Everybody knows that. But the part I really liked was, it's insane how he never plays a slice when he's reaching for a backhand. He never plays a slice. Stressed it up. Because of course, it's obvious when he says it like that. It's true. But there's times where Medvedev is on the full stretch for a backhand, and no coach in their right mind would say play a double hander from that position, and Medvedev still goes for it. He went on Van de Zandschulp and said, sometimes the angles he makes with some shots, when you give him an angle, he's making a better angle when he hits the shot than when you'd see it on TV, basically. So he's basically saying, you might think that's a good angle on TV, but if you actually see it live, it's the stuff he can come out with is actually far more impressive than a lot of people give him credit for. Obviously, it's just how lanky he is, but his balance on the full stretch is unrivaled. I don't know. Is that maybe too much to say?
I
Not
don't think
sure.
it's too much to say. His balance and his reach are both just like the angles that he can produce are just you wonder how the hell is he pulling this off? Like
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
it, just his ability to neutralize and even counterpunch from extreme defensive positions is unlike it's Djokovic esque.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's obviously the player I had in mind when I was querying that one, because I actually would argue his defense could be better than Novak's. I feel like Novak's a little bit better at creating offensive opportunities, but Medvedev, I mean, how he finds his way around the court and some of the stuff he can come out with, maybe better than Novak. Maybe it's an argument for another day. I'll dive into the actual match itself. Undoubtedly one of the best wins of Tsitsipas' season. He was 1-6 head-to-head on hard courts against Medvedev before the match started. A few of the keys to success, even, if you will indulge me, David. It was probably winning that first set that made the biggest difference, because the second two sets were a completely different story, as I'll get onto. That first set was super high quality, though, and one of the shots for me was the backhand slice, which of course must have improved leagues from a few years ago, obviously.
Definitely.
Yeah, not obviously, sorry. People might not be aware of this, but used to slice open stance, now tends to slice closed stance. It's taken a lot of sort of jiggery pokery from whoever it is that's been teaching him. I don't know if it's a Philippus' thing, whoever he has on his team, whatever. But all of a sudden, the slice has so much more bite on it. The best thing he can do with that drop shot, though, with the slice, sorry, I've just given away. The best thing he can do with that slice is disguise a drop shot if he likes. Pull players forward if he likes, or he can slice it cross court again, keep it going. It's particularly effective against his biggest rivals for me, Zverev, who he can bring forward. His transition game's not the best, and Medvedev, because of course he can't respond with a slice. He could pull Medvedev forward as well, where his net play's not brilliant. He's got a few options against him, and it's something that's making this matchup a little less unfavourable than it used to be. Used it at 3-0 in the tiebreak, for example, just to pull Medvedev forward. Did the job. Because he disguised the drop shot so well. He did it on set point as well at 7-6, where Medvedev failed to pick up a short slice from the middle of the court. Were you aware of that, David, when you were watching the match? Did you feel like the variety from Tsitsipas was incredibly effective, or did you feel like it was just a bit of clutch stuff? Basically, obviously, hit a really good serve and set point at the end of the first set as well, just to save it. So,
I would say a little of
don't know.
both. And I would also
Yeah.
say that I thought that Medvedev looked a little off, a little lower energy, maybe. He wasn't
Mm-hmm.
maybe getting the consistent depth that he typically does. But you're right, Tsitsipas's backhand, the variety that he's been able to develop from that wing is miles ahead of what it was even 2 years ago, even last year, maybe even. And so I think that definitely played a role. And I think that, like you said, clutch serving, winning that first set tiebreak, and then also I like how in the second set he was down. I think he was down 0-5, 30-40, and
Yeah.
he got himself back to 3-5, and that allowed him to bring that momentum into the third set.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a combo. I think of a lot of both, serving the bat, solid baseline play, and also just Medvedev being a little below, I guess, my expectations of Medvedev.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. It's a shame to sort of chalk the third set down to histrionics, I guess, rather than tactical play. Because I mean, Tsitsipas did come up with some really good stuff to hold serve so many times, but realistically, that break of serve came because of Medvedev getting rattled by the fireworks that were going on. Not the fireworks' fault, obviously, more Medvedev. But the point is, it was something that kind of caused that to happen, which was a shame because there was 4 double faults in that one game where he was broken, which is obviously completely bizarre. Yeah, no, still a great win for Tsitsipas. He's not really having a terrible year, despite what a lot of people say on social media. I mean, he's got the most wins on tour this year at 46. So yeah, this is a pretty nice feather in his cap going into the US Open. I think he'll carry a lot of confidence where he might not have carried so much confidence in the past going into the US Open.
Yeah, and although I will say he didn't look great against Coric in the final. I
Yes.
I thought, I mean, he started great in that final. I don't know if you want me to. I can stop here, and if you don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll very quickly talk about Borna's win over Nadal
Yeah,
first,
yeah.
and then we'll move on. We'll move on to that win after this the sort of rundown of that match. Borna, of course, winning the Cincinnati Masters at number 152, lowest ranked player ever to win a Masters title. Absolutely incredible achievement. Seriously, do not underrate it because that is an incredible thing to pull off. I think he beat 5 seeded players this week. I mean, Nadal, RBA, FAA, Norrie, Tsitsipas. I mean, Musetti
Crazy.
as well, of course, at the start of the week. One of the runs of the season for any tournament. Seriously impressive. But yeah, the Nadal match itself. So Nadal was actually the only guy able to take a set off him, which is a nice, I guess that is quite nice for Nadal fans at the end of the week to at least be able to say that. But it was the kind of match that Nadal maybe let go. I don't know if you feel the same way. I'll just run down exactly what happened. There was that tie break where he had a few set points, or maybe it was just the one set point. But either way, he should have won that set point. It was a drive volley into the corner that he just kind of sprayed.
Yeah.
Just a total sort of lapse in concentration. And at like 5-4 as well, just going before the tie break, he had love 15-30, missed 2 forehand returns. Really not like him. I don't know how he didn't even find the court with them. Then double faults at 10-9 to give Coric the set in the first tie break. Did you feel like that was
Yeah,
Coric or Nadal?
I mean, so Coric in that match and all tournaments served really well.
Yeah,
But then again, we hold these top players to such high expectations. For me, it's like, well, I wouldn't, George hit 12 aces. He had 83% of his, won 83% of his first serves. He won 67% of his second serves, and he was only broken once. But for me, I'm also like, okay, I kind of expect a little better returning from Nadal. Because, yes, George
yes.
has
Mm-hmm.
done an amazing job serving in Cincinnati. But at the end of the day, Rafa Nadal has neutralized plenty of big serves in the past. So, I think some of it is just
Yeah,
getting used to that hardcore playing, especially with how quick Cincinnati was. Um, Definitely not the most ideal conditions for Rafa. And I think
yeah,
he would have probably liked another match or two of match prep before, a Grand Slam, given that this
yeah,
was his, I believe it was his first and maybe only match since Wimbledon or
yeah.
since Wimbledon.
That's right. Yeah, that is right. Yeah, loads of stuff to say in that. I mean, Rafa himself said he has to move forward mentally in terms of practice. He needs to be in a Grand Slam mode, is exactly what he said. And I mean, he's not sugarcoating that. I don't think he was happy with his level in this match. I definitely think he knows he can play better than that. And certainly what you said about returning, that was his lowest first and second serve return performance of the season
Wow.
against Coric. Yeah, which is to get both of those stats in the one match. Yeah, he must have been playing up pretty far under par, which isn't unfair to say.
Yeah,
Yeah, and Coric serving so well all week. I mean, serving regularly 125 mph plus, but I still don't think it's the sort of match that Rafa should be too happy about. I think there is stuff to improve there. I don't think
definitely.
that's unfair to
That
say.
drive
Yeah,
volley was really rough on set point.
it was.
Like that would
Yeah,
he would have probably won the match if he made everything about
yeah,
Cincinnati on the men's side would have probably been completely different if he made that drive volley, easy drive volley.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, George did serve well, but for me, is nothing like say Rafa playing Novak on a hard court. Novak able to spot serve a lot better than George, and I make this comparison because going into this match with Tsitsipas, I believe George is very similar to Novak in a lot of ways. He's got a pretty similar game. The forehand maybe not as good, but the backhand just as solid. Able to go cross for a long time, able to take it down the line when he needs to. Doesn't go for it all the time as much as say a Medvedev, but like Novak, can bide his time and go for it when the opportunity presents itself. And it works against Rafa if he's playing well enough and he's able to stay aggressive enough on that backhand cross into Rafa's forehand. And yeah, I still don't think. Despite that, I still think Rafa should have got more returns into play and should have been able to present a little bit more of a challenge,
Yeah.
which is a shame.
Now, do you think that Coric's serving is sustainable, long term? Because this was a little, this incredible week, serving.
Yeah, I have not got a clue. The one thing I would say actually is there is a chance that because it was a shoulder injury that was plaguing before, maybe that's allowing him to serve a lot
Good
better.
point.
Maybe
Yeah.
maybe that's been the thing that's been in the way, and it is sustainable. This is just the new Coric, coming out the other side of a pretty career close to career ending injury sort of thing. So it could be, David. I really don't know. Tsitsipas seemed to think that he has seen Coric serve more consistently than he did even in the. That's exactly what he said in that final match. So if we go on Tsitsipas's words, maybe Coric has got a better level of serving in him, but I don't know. I was pretty.
Tsitsipas is not always the most reliable narrator.
He's a salty boy, I gotta say. He's I've got a bit more to say about that in a second. Yeah, we'll move on to the Tsitsipas match. What were you going to say about the Tsitsipas match earlier?
He started off really strong. He burst out of the gates, early, and then his level fell off a cliff, and then towards the end, it was really weird. He stopped moving towards balls. I didn't notice any
Yeah.
sort of injury there, but like he just kind of, I don't know if he was pouting, if it was an actual injury. Did you ever see any clarification for what was happening towards the end there?
Nope, I have no idea what happened. I agree with you that it looked like he was tanking in some ways. I
Yeah.
really don't know. The commentator seemed to think he was doing a bit of a rope a dope thing and kind of pulling him in to then win points more easily. I didn't know. I don't buy that for a second, to be honest. He looked like he'd just completely gone. I really don't know what it was. Maybe if we take into consideration what Tsitsipas said after the match, the most telling quote for me was when he sort of laughed about every time he's played somebody on a hardcourt Masters final, he's played a robot, is exactly what he said. I feel like Coric kind of came across a bit, again,
Hmm.
Djokovic-esque, and that can just be a little bit, bad, soul destroying
Yeah.
sort of thing. So it could have just been that, David.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a good point. I think that once Tsitsipas went down in that first set tiebreak, it seemed like he just kind of mentally checked
Yeah.
out a little bit. And
Hmm.
so
Yeah, it's exactly what I've got down actually.
and so
Yeah.
I also noticed that he wasn't hitting his spots on serve nearly as well as he was towards the beginning of the match as the match kind of went on. And that Coric break in the
Hmm.
second set, it was a long time. Even I believe the service game before, Tsitsipas was under fire, and I think
Yeah.
Tsitsipas double faulted on break point in the to get him the decisive break in the second set too.
Yeah. One note as well about how he kind of mentally checked out. He, yeah, okay, he did use this tactic a little bit earlier on in the match, but it didn't really seem to work. I don't know if it was a tactical misplay or if it was just Tsitsipas's head being all over the place. For me, the tour, I've started using serve and volley a lot more. It's not just the odd player. It feels like it's cropping up in a lot of matches more consistently. I don't know if that's because of this. It probably will be because of the speed of the courts, I'd imagine, and that's how people sort of adapt it. But it's the sort of play that you play against Medvedev, and it works really well given his return position. Coric is a great returner, and if he stands in like that close to the return, it's not the best play, and it didn't work. And it kind of just looked like Tsitsipas was a bit desperate, a little bit mentally fried. That sort of play for me, just going serve volley mad on pretty big points. I'd kind of given away the ghost because it kind of looked like Coric knew it was coming. It just seemed a little bit. I don't know, it's not like him because he normally is pretty level headed despite all the drama he's been involved in recently. He's pretty decent at coming up with the right plays at the right
Yeah,
time. So I don't know. So it was an out of character match, David. For me.
Here's I noticed this a couple times in Cincinnati. For instance, where Medvedev had an emotional. I mean, Medvedev Tsitsipas was an emotional later night match, longer, physical. And then you come out for the match the next day. A little, he. I guess he started strong, but he couldn't maintain that intensity. We saw it also with Cam Norrie, in the night thriller against Alcaraz, come out the next day against Coric and kind of throw in a little low intensity dud. And so I almost felt like for Tsitsipas, like that Medvedev match, beating his rival, what I can't remember the exact quote of what Daniil said about him in Miami that one year, but there was a high intensity emotional match that almost felt like his final, and the Coric match was maybe like more of an afterthought.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think, um, yeah, the one other thing I'd like to say as well, but just because you mentioned Medvedev there, is what Tsitsipas said comparing Coric to Medvedev. He said he's like Daniel Medvedev, but hits the ball a bit harder, adds a bit more topspin to the ball, opens up the court. Basically, his ball has a little bit more weight to it when it comes off your strings. But it just feels like, yeah, that's what he was saying about a robot. It feels like he's just as consistent. Yeah, probably able to create a few more angles and stuff. It's not the same kind of ball that kind of floats off your strings, not in a bad way. That's it can be it can be really quick if Medvedev hits it right. But yeah, he's the robot thing. That's just what keeps coming back to me. Coric is totally locked in. He's definitely Djokovic, Medvedev, all of those great backhands of the tour. That's the kind of player that I feel like we're seeing at the moment. And quite frankly, him squeaking himself into a seeded position at number 26 at the US Open is a godsend for the rest of the field, because it could have been pretty brutal if somebody had found themselves facing Coric in the
That would
first
have been
round.
a very, very dangerous floater. Although I want to,
Yeah,
you know what
yeah,
though, Jack, I want to see him sustain it. I'm not convinced that
yeah,
he's going to be near that form in New York.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, David, I think it comes down to the serve and whether or not that serve is a
Yeah.
flash in the pan. Because if he can keep winning 3 points for himself like that, he loosens up in return. He keeps playing like that, day in day out. It could be the shoulder.
Yeah,
Only time will tell, David. I think that's the important thing.
definitely.
It's the third title of Coric's career, 250, 500 now Masters. Also, surface versatile. That's a clay, a grass, and a hardcourt title. Last year, not last year, sorry, in 2020, he was seeded number 26 when he beat Tsitsipas, having saved 6 match points.
Yes,
Seeded
that was
number
a good
20.
one. That was quite. Did you watch that? That was I'll never
Yeah,
forget that one.
I really didn't. I didn't really know what
It's
I was
probably middle of the
watching.
night for you.
Yeah, no, I said, well, I watched it. I watched it the next day. I didn't see it
Okay.
live, but yeah, I didn't know what had happened before I'd seen the match, and to see what unfolded was crazy. Actually, similar vibes to Tsitsipas last year when he played that third set against Alcaraz.
Mm-hmm.
It was like from double break, 5-2 up. Something about Tsitsipas and Leeds at the US Open. Yeah, I don't know how I
Can't
feel
trust
about him
them.
going into it. So yeah, hopefully, yeah, in seeded number 26, we see a rematch with Tsitsipas maybe in the third or fourth round. I'd love it. It'd be really good.
Yeah.
On that note, David, I think we'll close up shop there at the perfect time of an hour. It was quite, it was quite tidy, I guess. I felt like we covered loads there, as
Yeah.
always, David. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
No, I was going to say thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it. This is always fun getting to just talk tennis.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you on, David. Like, it's such a lovely chat as always. Like, I'll try and get you on as soon as I can again. You've helped me out immensely, and yeah, I mean that felt like half the time there. It was a brilliant discussion. Please go check out David on Twitter. You can follow him at tennisblogger1. Got it right.
Yes,
I,
yes,
please go see his blog, all about tennis blog. You've got a link on there, don't you, David?
I
I'm
do.
sure.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
although I haven't updated my profile in so long, to be honest, I don't even know what's on there.
Well, okay. Well, at least give him the Twitter follow then, because you're still an active Twitter user for sure.
Yeah, and I'll try to
Um,
tweet out. I try my best to tweet out the articles I write. Sometimes I forget, but like if I write something in my blog, I'll tweet it out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there's brilliant stuff on there. So please go check it out, guys. Thanks for listening this far through. If you want to check out any of my work as well, @ontheline_Jack, onlinetennis.uk. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll catch you next time on the Online Tennis Podcast. Cheers, David. Thank you.
Thank you so much.